I left for work at 5:40 that morning. At least that's what my family thought. When I look back, that was the moment everything changed. If you're watching this, tell me where you're from or what time it is. The air outside was colder than usual. One of those mornings where the sky still looks half asleep. I locked the front door, walked down the driveway, and let my footsteps echo far enough to sound convincing. But instead of getting in my car, I slipped around the side yard, used the old sliding door we never fixed, and stepped quietly back into my own house. The silence inside felt different, not peaceful, expectant, like the walls were holding their breath. I stood in the hallway, letting my eyes adjust to the softer light. The coffee maker beeped in the kitchen. My wife Laura always turned it on after I left, never before. It was a ritual I used to find comforting. Today, it only reminded me how separate our routines had become. I moved slowly, avoiding the spots on the floor I knew would creak. From the living room, I heard my son Ethan drop something on the table, a heavy thud, maybe a binder or a stack of papers. His voice came next, low and frustrated. "He left early again," Ethan muttered. "Good, we can talk." Then I heard Laura sigh, but it wasn't a tired sigh. It was the sound someone makes before saying something they've rehearsed too many times. "It's better this way," she said. "He's predictable in the mornings." Felt something tighten in my chest. Predictable. I'd never thought that word could hurt. I edged closer, staying behind the wall. From where I stood, I could see only their shadows, the outlines of two people who shared my table, my meals, my roof. Yet at that moment, they felt like strangers discussing a mutual acquaintance instead of a husband and a father. Ethan spoke again. "We need him to agree soon. I don't want this dragging out." "Agree to what?" Laura told him to lower his voice. "Just be patient," she said. "He won't be around much longer anyway." The room suddenly felt colder. For a moment, I thought I misheard her. My heart started beating so hard I worried they might hear it. I leaned against the wall, the paint cool under my palm. I prepared myself for complaints, maybe a few criticisms. But not this, Mom. "It has to be this week," Ethan insisted. "The longer we wait, the harder it'll be to control the situation." Control the situation. I felt something inside me shift like a slow, painful click of a lock turning. I stayed silent and listened, every sense sharper than before. Laura began listing steps. Ethan added a few more. They weren't guessing. They weren't emotional. They were organized, and then, unexpectedly, soft footsteps came from the hall with a lighter. Hesitant steps of someone who didn't want to interrupt Sophie. My daughter's voice was quiet, still wrapped in sleep. "What are you two talking about?" This time, Laura's tone softened, but only slightly. "Nothing you need to worry about." Sophie wasn't convinced. "Is it about Dad?" The silence that followed told me more than words could have. I felt my throat tighten. Of all the things I expected to hear that morning, the idea of my own daughter being brushed aside for a conversation about me, that was the wound that stung differently. Something scraped across the counter. Then Ethan said, "Don't get involved. You always defend him. Just stay out of it." That single sentence revealed something I never expected. Sophie had already been aware something was happening. She had defended me before. "How many times?" Her voice trembled. "You're talking about him like he isn't even here?" Ethan muttered. "He's barely here anyway." And there it was, quiet cruelty from my own son. A cruelty spoken in a tone people use when they think the subject isn't listening. I leaned back against the wall and breathed through it. No anger, no outburst. Just a cold, steady understanding that the people closest to me had entire conversations I was never meant to hear. They came unexpectedly. As Laura moved around the kitchen, I heard the distinct sound of a folder being opened, thin pages brushing against each other. I stepped closer and caught a glimpse through the doorway. Legal-sized documents spread. Across the island, something with a signature line, something with my name typed at the top. I took out my phone and quietly checked the timestamp on the home security camera. 5:47 a.m., proof that I walked out and came back. proof that everything I was hearing wasn't imagined. I wasn't sure what hurt more, that they were planning something behind my back, or that they felt confident enough to discuss it openly the moment I stepped outside. When I finally pulled myself away, my hands felt colder than they should have. My entire life, I believed that trust was something you built, brick by brick. But that morning, I realized how fast one quiet moment could turn those bricks into dust. And as Ethan lowered his voice again, saying my name in a tone that didn't sound like family, I understood something else. Whatever they were planning, it had already begun, and this was only the first morning I listened. The next one would reveal something far worse. I always wondered what my family sounded like when I wasn't around. That morning, I learned the answer. Where you're listening from right now. I stayed pressed against the hallway wall, the kind of stillness you only master after years of keeping the peace. The house felt different, like every whisper carried more weight, more intention. The early light coming through the kitchen window painted long shadows across the floor, stretching toward me like warnings. Ethan was the first to speak again. His voice had that clipped confidence he used with people he didn't respect, but pretended to tolerate. We need to finalize it, Mom. The more we wait, the more unpredictable he'll be. Unpredictable me. Laura stirred the coffee with a slow, practiced rhythm. I know, but pushing him too fast might make him suspicious. Suspicious? Of what? My pulse leaned forward, listening harder than I ever had in my life. Ethan scoffed. Tapping something on the counter, maybe a pen, maybe impatience. Come on, Dad. Signs anything you put in front of him if you sound calm enough. Just follow the plan. My stomach tightened. My own son, coaching my wife on how to manipulate me. Before I could absorb that, I heard soft footsteps again. Not hesitant this time, more determined. Sophie walked into the kitchen, probably still in her oversized sweatshirt, the one she wore during exams or stressful days. She wasn't a morning person unless something kept her up. What plan? She asked, and her voice held a small tremor, like she already knew she wouldn't like the answer. Laura's tone turned flat. It's nothing serious. We're just talking about household decisions. Household decisions don't need a folder and whispered conversations. Ethan's chair scraped loudly as he turned toward her. Stay out of it, Sophie. I won't, she said, her voice gaining strength. Not if it involves Dad. I felt something warm in my chest, something painfully rare lately. Defended, seen, but Ethan didn't appreciate her interruption. You're too attached, he snapped. You always take his side, 'cause he's decent, she shot back. And because I know you're hiding something. The room fell silent, and I could almost picture the stare down between them. Laura broke it with a sigh. But not the kind that resolved conflicts, the kind that dismissed them. Sophie, go get ready for the day, she said. We don't need your input. You need his signature though, right? Sophie whispered. Sometimes the quietest lines cut deepest. Ethan hissed. Just mind your own life. You're making things harder. My daughter's footsteps retreated, slow and wounded. The sound hit me harder than anything they'd said. I had no idea how long she'd been carrying this unease alone. I waited until her door shut before inching closer to the kitchen entryway. From where I stood, I could see the edge of a document-thick paper, coarse texture, likely something official. Laura lowered her voice again. I wish she'd stop getting in the way. She's too emotional. Which is exactly why she can't be told, Ethan replied. Once he signs it, this whole thing becomes simple. Sign what? My breathing became shallow, each inhale slow and steady. I needed clarity, not panic. Then, Ethan said something that froze me entirely. I found a new version of the agreement. It's easier. Fewer questions for him to ask. Agreement. A newer version, simplified so I wouldn't ask questions. I felt the ground tilt under me. That was when Ethan left the kitchen to grab something from his room. He pushed the folder closer to the edge. Enough for me to catch a glimpse of the top line, property transfer. Agreement, Heart Residence, my name was printed underneath. I stepped back quickly, heart pounding so loudly I feared the sound would give me away. I didn't touch it, not yet. but the words burned themselves into my mind. Laura cleared her throat, gathering the documents back into a stack. He won't question it if we talk about responsibilities. He hates conflict. Ethan reinterred. Good. Then let's use that. Use that. Use me. I kept my face expressionless, even though no one could see me. Something cold and precise settled inside me. The kind of clarity men only reach when the floor beneath their life finally cracks. A few minutes later, Sophie emerged again, quieter this time. She stood at the kitchen doorway and spoke in a small voice I barely recognized. "You're both making a mistake," she whispered. "Dad isn't as blind as you think." They didn't even respond. She walked away, defeated. And within that quiet moment, I made a promise to myself. If they truly believed I never listened, then listening was exactly how I would uncover everything. Because families sound very different when they think you're gone. And what I would hear next would change everything. I wasn't planning to stay hidden that long. But then I heard my wife say something that pinned me to the floor where you're sitting right now. Laura's voice floated across the kitchen steady, confident, almost rehearsed. "He won't read it," she said. "He never does. He signs because I ask." The words settled into me like cold rain. All the years of trust, of handing her envelopes and forms without question, suddenly felt like a series of small traps I'd walked into willingly. Ethan laughed under his breath. "Exactly. Get him to sign it while he's tired. He doesn't pay attention then." I had to close my eyes for a moment. The kitchen light flickered softly, and the quiet hum of the refrigerator filled the silence between their sentences. It was strange how normal the house felt, how calm everything looked, while inside me something was being dismantled piece by piece. Laura shuffled papers, the sound crisp and deliberate. "We'll just say it's about simplifying responsibilities. He doesn't like complicated explanations," Ethan added, "or tell him it's related to insurance. Old people don't challenge insurance forms." Old people. I swallowed tightly, the words sticking to my ribs. I'd only turned 58. Not old, not frail, not oblivious. Behind me, the house was bathed in the pale morning light, soft, golden, deceptively peaceful. But the people inside it, they were mapping out how to move me out of my own life. Then Sophie reappeared, her steps gentler this time, as if she'd been crying. She hovered at the kitchen doorway, voice trembling. "What are you trying to make him sign?" Laura didn't answer at first. Instead, she placed her cup down with a soft click, irritation sharpening her words. "Sophie, stop asking questions." "No," Sophie whispered. "Not until you tell me," Ethan scoffed. "It's just paperwork." "Why are you so dramatic?" "Because you're hiding it," she shot back. "If it was harmless, you wouldn't wait for him to leave." The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable, like the air before a storm breaks. Laura finally exhaled slowly. "Fine. If it makes you feel better, it's a simple transfer. Just adjusting some things legally." "What things?" Sophie asked again, firmer now. Ethan rolled his eyes. "Stop acting like you're protecting him. He'll be fine." But Sophie didn't back down. "Then show me the papers." Laura's voice dropped, firm and cold. "Sophie, this doesn't concern you." I could almost imagine my daughter's face at that moment, hurt, angry, and yet still standing there because her loyalty was stronger than her fear. That realization cut deeper than the betrayal itself. Ethan grew more irritated. "Look, Dad doesn't understand house management. Mom and I do. We're just putting things in order." Putting things in order in their favor. I felt my fingers curl into fists without meaning to. Then, as if the universe wanted to sharpen my clarity, I saw something. Laura slid one specific document to the top of the stack. It had a darker border and a cleaner layout than the others. I couldn't read the full title, but the words "transfer of ownership" were unmistakable. I came seconds later when they left the kitchen to check something upstairs. I stepped out from my hiding spot, pulse steady, movements precise. I didn't touch the papers. I only needed one glance. My name was printed on the signature line, not typed under owner, not listed as grantor, but placed neatly. Perfectly, under the word signer. One small shift in a line of text. And suddenly the house I'd built, the home I'd paid for, the place where I raised 2 children, could be moved out of my hands with a pen stroke. I took a step back, careful not to disturb anything. The kitchen felt colder now. The tiles under my feet felt less familiar, as if the house itself knew what they were planning to do. I returned to the hallway just as I heard their footsteps coming down again. Laura said, "He'll sign tonight." "He always signs things at night." Ethan laughed. "Good. Then tomorrow we can." Sophie interrupted sharply. "You're treating him like he's a burden." Laura's tone hardened. "He's not a burden, but he is. Slowing things down." My throat tightened again. Slowing things down. Was that what I had become? I listened a little longer, long enough to hear Ethan outline a manipulation strategy he'd clearly practiced. "Mom, you start the conversation calm. Mention bills, mention responsibility. I'll guide him to the part he needs to sign. Done." Was rehearsed, organized, planned well before this morning. Then came the line that confirmed everything. Laura said quietly, "You'll agree. He trusts me more than he should." That wasn't a wife speaking. That was someone exploiting confidence that wasn't earned anymore. As their voices blended into routine morning chatter again, I stepped into the living room, letting the stillness settle around me. And that's when I understood something simple, sharp, and irreversible. They weren't asking for my signature. They were counting on my blindness. The next morning, I would stay again, and the truth I'd hear would be worse. I thought I had already heard the worst, until the phone rang. "What city you're in right now?" I stood in the hallway, hidden behind the corner near the staircase. The morning light had shifted, turning from soft gold to a brighter, sharper white through the windows. It made the dust in the air shimmer, small particles floating between me and the kitchen, where my family was unknowingly unraveling my life. Laura's phone vibrated first, a short buzz against the countertop. She hesitated before answering, lowering her voice into that tone people use when they don't want anyone else to hear. "Hello?" "Yes. I can talk now." I leaned slightly forward, heart pacing itself. The voice on the other end was muffled, but firm, professional. I could tell immediately it wasn't someone she would speak to casually. Laura said, "Yes, everything is moving on schedule. He won't be a problem. I swallowed hard, letting the words settle, cold and metallic. Ethan stepped closer. "Is that them?" Laura nodded, covering the microphone with her hand. Quiet. I could hear fragments from the caller phrases like finalizing the review, document submissions, and something that made my stomach drop. "Is the pension sorted?" "My pension?" Laura's lips tightened. "We're working on it. I didn't even know anyone was supposed to be working on it. I pressed back into the wall, grounding myself. Old paint. Cool surface. Something familiar to anchor against the unfamiliar conversation unfolding in my home. The caller kept speaking. Their tone clipped and efficient. Laura murmured responses, avoiding specifics but confirming enough to raise alarm bells in my mind. Then she said something quiet, so quiet I almost didn't catch it. "Yes, by the end of the month, he'll be out." Double quotes out. Of what? The company? The house? My own life? Footsteps approached the heavier, impatient steps of Ethan. He took the phone from Laura's hand and spoke in a falsely respectful tone, the one he used when he wanted to impress someone. "Yes. Sir, I can confirm the paperwork is ready. We just need his signature." My jaw tightened. That line again, my signature. Their golden ticket? The voice on the other end sounded satisfied, almost cheerful. "Good, as long as the timeline holds," Ethan agreed immediately. Too quickly. Too eagerly, I watched my son transfer the phone back to Laura. She ended the call with a clipped goodbye, then exhaled heavily. Sophie, who must have been listening from the hallway upstairs, stepped into view. Her voice was small again. "Mom, what does out mean?" Laura froze. For a split second, she looked like a child caught doing something they knew was wrong. "It doesn't concern you," she said, regaining her sternness. "It concerns Dad." Sophie whispered, So it concerns me. Ethan laughed, crossing his arms. Why do you always make everything dramatic? I'm not being dramatic, she said, voice breaking. You're talking like he's a burden. Like you want him gone? Laura didn't argue. She didn't defend. She just said, you don't understand. But Sophie did. She understood more than they realized. The silence after that was a strange one. Not empty-loaded, sharp. I stayed perfectly still. Breathing as quietly as I could, Ethan brushed past Sophie, muttering, Dad will sign. He always does. Sophie's reply was immediate and fierce. Not if he knew what you were doing. Laura turned sharply. Enough. Sophie flinched, but didn't back away. Something inside me cracked and reformed at the same time. My daughter was the only one fighting for me, and she was standing alone. Laura grabbed the papers off the counter, shoving them into a drawer as if erasing evidence. Then Ethan said the line that tied everything together. Once the severance is settled, there's nothing left for him to control. Severance house. Nothing left for him to control. My world suddenly had clearer, just painful ones, that came quietly. Later that morning, when everyone left the kitchen, I slipped in and checked Laura's phone on the table. The last incoming number wasn't saved as a contact. It belonged to the HR office at my company. I took a picture of the call log. Timestamp. 6:12 a.m. Everything about it felt calculated, coordinated, predetermined. As I tucked the phone back in place, I felt something new settle in my chest. Not anger. Not fear, clarity. Because now I understood the truth. What I heard today wasn't the end of a plan. It was the middle and the next part. Would explain why they were rushing. I thought I was the only one who had started listening. But that morning, I learned my daughter had been listening long before me. What time it is where you are? After Laura ended the call with HR, the house fell into a fragile sort of silence. Not peaceful and easy, stretched thin, like everyone was waiting for someone else to break it. I stayed hidden in the hallway, letting my breathing match the slow rhythm of the house. Every corner, every creak felt like it carried a story I hadn't heard yet. I heard Sophie's door open upstairs, soft and hesitant. Her footsteps weren't rushed. They were cautious, like she was bracing herself for something she'd already feared. When she reached the bottom step, she didn't enter the kitchen right away. She paused, listening first to something I never realized she did. The pause itself told me everything. She knew things weren't right. Finally, she stepped forward. Mom, she said softly, why were you talking to HR? Laura stiffened, not turning around. Sophie, please. Not this again. Again. That one word struck me hard. How many times had she tried to warn them? How many times had she been shut down? Ethan didn't bother hiding his irritation. Don't start, Sophie. Seriously. I won't stop, she said, voice trembling, but steady. Dad doesn't deserve this. Laura let out a slow breath, the kind you exhale before delivering a line that will end an argument. You're young. You don't understand how responsibilities work. Sophie stepped further into the kitchen. I understand that you're doing something behind his back, Ethan scoffed. We're not doing anything wrong? Then why are you whispering? She shot back silence, just thick, guilty silence. Laura turned, finally facing her. This is grown-up stuff. We're organizing finances. It's complicated. Then explain it to me, Sophie said. Laura hesitated, eyes flickering. You wouldn't understand. Try me. Her voice cracked on the last word. I could feel the hurt resting under her years of watching dynamics she didn't like. Years of feeling unheard. Ethan rolled his eyes like she was an inconvenience. You're making this harder on everyone. Dad is, he caught himself, but not fast enough. Sophie's eyes narrowed. Dad is what? Laura stepped between them, holding out her hand. Stop. Ethan, leave it. But the damage was done. Sophie looked shaken as she backed away from the counter. You're planning something, and it's bad. I can feel it, Ethan muttered under his breath. She's always in the way, Laura snapped. Ethan. But it was too late. Sophie heard it, and I heard her hurt. She walked out of the kitchen, shoulders hunched. arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold in emotions that had nowhere to land. A part of me wanted to step out then, to tell her I was there. She didn't have to fight alone. But another part knew this moment belonged to silence. Silence reveals truths people try to hide. I followed her with my eyes as she moved down the hallway. She sat on the bottom stair, pulled out a small notebook from her sweatshirt pocket, and scribbled something quickly messy, rushed. Emotional handwriting. Then something unexpected happened. She tore out the page and dropped it. Later, after she'd gone upstairs again, I approached quietly. The note had landed halfway under the stair railing. I slid it out carefully. The handwriting was jagged, uneven. The kind of writing you put down when your hands are shaking. It read, "Dad doesn't know about the second account. If he finds out, they'll blame me." I stared at the words, heart thudding in a slow, heavy beat. Second account. Blame her. Hide things from me. My daughter wasn't just witnessing the betrayal, she was stuck between it. She had been carrying the weight alone, trying to protect someone who didn't even know they needed protecting. I folded the note, slipped it into my wallet, and sat quietly on the stair she'd just occupied. The wood was still warm where she'd been sitting, a tiny reminder that she had been holding herself together. Down the hallway, I could hear Laura and Ethan whispering again, planning, organizing, strategizing. Their voices felt distant now, like noise from a world I no longer belonged to. But Sophie's silence. That silence spoke to me. It wasn't the silence of someone hiding. It was the silence of someone scared to speak the truth, and I realized something sharp and painful. My daughter was the only one who saw the storm coming. She had been trying to warn me in her own, quiet ways, and I had never noticed. That morning, I promised myself something simple, steady, and unbreakable. I would protect her, even if the people we needed protection from were living under our own roof. What I uncovered next would explain why they needed a second account hand, why they were so desperate for my signature. I used to think I understood my own finances. That morning proved I didn't even understand my own family, what time it is around you right now. After finding Sophie's note, I didn't move for a long moment. The hallway felt colder. The air felt heavier, and every instinct in me whispered that the second account was the part of the iceberg still underwater, darker, waiting to surface. I stepped quietly into my home office, closing the door just enough to feel hidden but not enough to draw suspicion. The familiar scent of old paper and printer ink grounded me. This room had always been my sanctuary: retirement paperwork, tax forms, corporate files. Ironically, it was the one room in the house no one bothered to enter unless they needed something from me. I turned on the desk lamp. Its warm yellow glow spilled across the wooden surface. I unlocked my laptop and opened my email. At first, everything looked ordinary: promotions, company letters, automated reminders. But then I remembered something. Laura insisted on handling the household banking for the past year. She said it was simpler. She said I had too much on my plate. She said she liked managing things, like a fool. I believed her. I typed the name of our bank into the search bar. A dozen emails popped up. Monthly summaries, alerts, password resets. Most of them marked as red Evan, the ones I never opened. Someone had been checking my email. My pulse quickened. I clicked the most recent statement. It took a few seconds to load, long enough for my thoughts to scatter into sharp pieces. When the document finally opened, the numbers stared back at me like strangers. Transfers, withdrawals, amounts. They didn't match anything I recognized. And next to each transaction, under the initiated by label, Laura Hart. I scrolled down slowly. There it was. A. Different account number from ours, one digit off from my primary. Account a shadow behind the real one. A. Secondary allocation account. My breathing grew shallow. Clicked another file on earlier monthly statement. Same pattern. More transfers. More unexplained movements. Small enough to avoid attention. Frequent enough to matter. Then I clicked the earliest one that appeared in the searcher statement from 8. months ago, and every alarm inside me went off. A large transfer, flagged as emergency allocation, exit plan, exit plan. The same phrase I had heard whispered in the kitchen. The same tone they used when talking about meal-like. I was a project being phased out. My fingers trembled slightly as I reached for the printer on the shelf. The machine came to life, softly humming. 6 pages. Financial proof. A trail they thought I would never find. As the last page slid out, stared at the crisp lines of text. The numbers didn't lie. People could justify anything, but paper was honest. I folded the printouts neatly, placed them inside a plain envelope, and slid it into my desk drawer under old tax forms. My hands were calmer than they should have been. This kind of betrayal didn't burn. It froze. Behind the office door, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Ethan's voice drifted faintly. "We'll talk to him tonight." "Mom, don't worry. He never checks anything." Laura's voice followed. "Let's hope so." I closed my laptop silently and stepped away from the desk. Listening to them felt like eavesdropping on strangers. The people I trusted were coordinating strategies about me, in the comfort of the home I paid for, and yet there was a part of me that stayed steady, still breathing, still observing. Maybe it was the shock. Maybe it was age. Or maybe it was the deep, quiet instinct of a man who had spent decades being underestimated. I opened the office door just enough to look into the hallway. Sophie was there. She wasn't part of their conversation. She was leaning against the wall, arms wrapped around herself, eyes glistening not with anger, but with guilt. When she saw me peeking out, she startled slightly. Thinking she'd been caught by them, I stepped back into the shadows before she noticed fully. She didn't know I was there, but she was trying her best to protect me in ways she couldn't even explain downstairs. Ethan continued, "Tonight's perfect. He's tired after work. He'll sign anything." Paper rustled. "That same folder? That same plan?" Laura murmured. "He just has to believe it's routine." As if stripping someone of their home and future was as casual as paying a bill, I closed the door again, letting the weight of the new knowledge settle in my chest. The second account connected the dots, the urgency, the secrecy, the documents, the phone calls. Everything pointed to one truth. They weren't planning to change the house. They were planning to change my life, without me in it. And yet, the worst part wasn't their betrayal. It was knowing. Sophie had tried to warn me long before I knew what needed warning. I would listen again, and this time, I would catch the part they were hiding most carefully. I always assumed I had a firm grip on my finances. Until the morning, I realized someone else had a firmer grip than me. What time it is where you are right now? After hearing Ethan and Laura talk about the plan, I stepped back into my office. It was the one room in the house that still felt like Mina quiet space with soft lamplight. Old wooden shelves and the faint scent of paper that had absorbed years of my life. I closed the door almost silently, leaving it open an inch so no one would wonder where I disappeared. I sat at my desk, the leather chair creaking softly beneath me. My laptop screen glowed awake, casting a cold blue tint across my hands. It felt strange opening my own digital life with the suspicion that it had been opened by someone else long before I ever thought to look. I typed the bank's name into my email search bar. At first, nothing seemed off. A few statements, a few notifications, the usual clutter. But then I noticed something odd: several messages marked as read. On dates I knew I hadn't been online. I clicked the most recent statement. PDF opened. Page 1 looked fine: routine balances, grocery purchases, the steady hum of a predictable life. But on page 2, everything changed. Transfers, small ones at first. $40, $60, $100. Then, larger amount, unmistakable withdrawals that had no purpose. No explanation. Under each transaction, a note. Transferred to secondary allocation account. Secondary allocation account? My eyebrows knit together. We only had 2 accounts. A checking, a savings. This third one was new. I clicked another statement. Same pattern. Repeated transfers always to the same unfamiliar. Count number. 8 digits. No name attached. No description beyond that quiet phrase. Secondary allocation. I took a long, deliberate breath and continued scrolling. Then I saw the one that changed everything. Exit plan. $12,500 exit plan. A cold wave ran through me. Not the cold of weather, something much deeper. The cold you feel when you realize you've been living inside a story someone else is writing for you. I clicked the earliest statement that mentioned it. The date hit harder than the number. 8 months ago, while I was busy working late, while I thought life was stable, while I trusted the people sharing my dinner, table. 8 months. 8 months of planning a future that didn't include me at that moment. My fingers started trembling. Not out of fear, out of something sharper. Clarity. I hit print. The printer hummed to life, slow and steady, feeding out each page like it was confessing a secret someone tried to bury in code and numbers. When the last page landed, I gathered the stack, smoothed the edges, and studied the figures. It was all deliberate, all planned, all disguised as routine household management. Laura had done every transfer. Ethan had labeled one of them, and Sophie had known her message, "Dad doesn't know about the second account," finally made sense. She had seen something she wasn't supposed to. Something she wasn't old enough to carry alone. Outside the office, I heard 2 voices drifting from the hallway. Ethan was speaking confidently, almost proudly. "We'll talk to him tonight. He won't figure it out." Laura's footsteps tapped softly behind him. "He never checks anything. He hates going through numbers." That line stung in a quiet, personal way. Not because it was insulting, but because it was true. I hated conflict so much. I had stopped looking at the details of my own life. I closed the laptop gently and stood still, letting their voices carry through the house. Ethan lowered his voice. "Once he signs the transfer, we move the rest." "Then the house is ours?" Laura asked. "And the severance?" "It'll come through," Ethan said. "HR is working on it." HR, money, transfers, everything connected through documents, paper trails that were supposed to keep me blind. But now that I knew what to look for, everything made sense. I stepped back toward the office door and froze. Sophie was standing at the end of the hallway. Her eyes were red, her hands clenched. She looked at the closed office door with the expression of someone who wished she could warn me, but didn't know how. She whispered to no one in particular. "Dad, please see it, please." "Oh no, I was already inside." Listening. She didn't know I'd finally seen everything. I lid the printed statements into a folder and locked it in my desk drawer. My hands were steady now. Strangely steady, because I finally understood what the second account meant. It wasn't financial planning. It wasn't organization. It wasn't responsibility. It was the cost of removing me from the equation, and as painful as that truth was, it gave me something I hadn't had in weeks, a starting point. The next morning, I wouldn't just listen, I would watch. I would see the part of the plan they hadn't spoken aloud, yet the part they feared I'd discover, and that part would be the most revealing of all. I used to think a house becomes a home because of memories, but that morning, standing in my own living room, I realized a home can turn into something else entirely. What the weather is like where you are. The sun had fully risen by the time I stepped out of my office. Light spilled through the windows, bright, clean, almost beautiful. It should have made the house feel warm. Instead, it highlighted every distance between me and the people living under its roof. The walls no longer felt like they belonged to me. The air didn't feel familiar. Even the furniture looked different, as if someone had quietly rearranged the emotional weight of the place. I moved slowly down the hallway, careful not to be seen. From the living room, I heard Ethan humming to himself, some upbeat tune that didn't belong in a house where betrayal was being folded. Into breakfast, he was rearranging the mantel again. Ethan never touched the mantel growing up. He always said photos were pointless clutter. But now he moved things like he was staging a home he already imagined owning. The framed vacation picture, I loved the one where Sophie was 8 and smiling with one missing tooth, was sitting face down on the table. He lifted a different frame instead, a photo of him in college, holding a certificate. He dusted it with his sleeve and placed it in the center, nudging it until it was perfectly aligned. A chill traveled through me. This wasn't a sun making space. This was a man preparing to erase someone. Watched as he opened the bottom cabinet and pulled out a box. Inside it were small keepsakes I hadn't seen in years, old birthday cards. A watch my late father gave me. The wooden carving a coworker brought from overseas. Things that had no monetary value, but meant everything to me. He tossed the watch aside like it was clutter. The thud it made on the floor felt personal. Then I heard another set of footsteps. Slighter. Sophie walked into the room. She froze when she saw the mantle. "Why did you move everything?" she asked softly. Ethan didn't look up. "Because the place looks outdated. Might as well make it look decent." Sophie walked around the coffee table and held the framed vacation photo in both hands. Her thumbs brushed over the dusty glass. This was Dad's favorite. Ethan shrugged. Not everything revolves around him. Something in Sophie's shoulders sank. "You don't have to remove him to improve the house." He finally faced her. "I'm organizing." "Mom said it's fine." Sophie placed the photo back in its original spot, straightening it carefully. "I don't care. This house is still his." "For now," Ethan muttered. That two-word sentence carried more truth than anything he'd said all morning, before I could gather myself. I heard Laura's voice from the dining room. She was practicing something, reading from a paper, repeating lines under her breath. I moved closer, hiding behind the archway. Her script went like this: "Michael, hey, we've been thinking about simplifying responsibilities. Michael, things would be easier if Ethan took on more. Michael, we need your help signing this small document." She was rehearsing a pitch, a manipulation, a speech designed to soften me before the papers arrived. I watched her run through the lines 3 times, adjusting her tone each time, adding more warmth, removing warmth, adding it back again. She was calibrating her voice the way people do when they're about to negotiate a contract, not talk to a spouse. My chest felt tight, but my breathing stayed controlled. Pain had a strange way of slowing down everything around me. It's like the air itself was thicker. Then something small but powerful happened. Sophie walked from the living room into the dining room. She didn't speak. She didn't argue. She just picked up a family photo that had been pushed aside and placed it back at the center of the table. Laura's eyes flickered with annoyance, but she said nothing. Sophie whispered, "He's still part of this family, Mom." Laura didn't respond. She just folded the paper and slipped it into her purse, and with that simple gesture, I understood something crystal clear. They were preparing for something that required removing pieces of me, my photos, my memories, my presence, until what remained was easy to reshape. I stepped back into my office doorway, letting the thin crack of space between the door and frame become my shield. In the quiet, I opened my phone and snapped a quick picture of the mantle, the photo missing, the new arrangement. The way the room no longer resembled the home I built, a small piece of evidence that the emotional betrayal wasn't imagined, it was physical, visible, documented. I slipped the phone into my pocket just as Ethan said, "Mom, he'll agree. Once he signs, everything else will fall into place." Fall into place, as if my removal was a piece in a puzzle they had been assembling. I let the words settle inside me like stones sinking in water. This wasn't confusion. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was intention, layered deeply into their actions. And for the first time, I realized something painful. They'd already mentally moved me out of this home. I was the only one still living in it. But the next morning, they would say something that didn't just hurt, changed the entire meaning of their plan. I wasn't planning to check my work email that morning. But when trust breaks, curiosity becomes a kind of survival. What country you're listening from? After the moment with the mantle, after seeing my life quietly rearranged by the people I loved, I returned to my office. I didn't turn on the main light. I didn't want the house to sense movement. Instead, I relied on the glow of the monitor as it flickered awake, washing the room in a cold bluish tint. My inbox opened with its usual mix of corporate politeness and digital noise. But something caught my attention immediately, a new subject line I hadn't seen before. Transition plan? Preliminary notes. Transition plan. A phrase cold enough to be clinical, but personal enough to strike straight through me. I clicked. The first message was from a name I recognized from HR Ruth Jennings, someone I had spoken to 3 times in over a decade. She was polite but distant, the kind of person who handled files more often than conversations. The email thread began innocently, following up on your request. But the next line shifted everything. Ethan Hart provided insight regarding your current workload and long-term suitability. Long-term suitability. My son, my replacement, my EVAOA. My hands went still on the desk. I scrolled. The thread grew darker with each reply. Ruth wrote, "In agreement, early separation is recommended before Q4. Early separation. Had I really become a problem to be phased out?" I kept reading, jaw tight, breath slow. A forwarded attachment came next to PDF titled Role Transition Summary. I opened it. The document was cold, precise. Bullet points about my performance. Notes about fatigue and declining engagement. I didn't recognize any of it until I reached the footer. Data submitted by Ethan Hart. My own son had written an assessment of me. A false one. One that could cost me everything I had built. But the worst part wasn't the lies. It was the confidence behind them. Another email appeared. In the chain, this one from a corporate consultant I'd never met. Once. The internal review is completed. We recommend offering severance. Encourage voluntary departure to avoid complications. Voluntary departure.complications.severance. They were preparing to remove me. Gently, professionally, quietly. The way a company removes a piece of old equipment. Then I saw a final message at the bottom of the thread, a short, casual note from Ethan. He won't fight it. He trusts the system. Just send it through. My eyes lingered on those words longer than I expected. He trusts the system. It wasn't a compliment. It was a calculation. I sat back in the chair, staring at the screen. The email thread didn't just reveal betrayal, it revealed timing. Everything had a date. Everything had a plan. Every step, employment, house, finances, was designed to unfold together. The printer hummed softly when I clicked print thread. 6 pages fed out, warm and smelling faintly of toner. I placed the pages into a manila folder and slid it into the bottom drawer. Under old insurance files. I doubted anyone checked there. No one cared about my paperwork until now. When I stepped out into the hallway again, the house felt noisier. Footsteps above, cabinet doors opening, the clatter of dishes. Ordinary sounds in a home that no longer felt ordinary. Then Sophie appeared at the top of the stairs. She wasn't looking for anyone. She didn't call out. She simply scanned the hallway like she expected something to go wrong. Her eyes met mine for half a second, though she didn't realize I was watching from the shadows. She looked scared, not of me, but for me. She retreated into her room just as Ethan walked down the hall, phone pressed to his ear. Yes. I emailed them the final review, he said casually. Dad won't question it. He barely understands half of what he signs. He paused at the bottom step, smiling to himself. Friday works. Let's finish everything by Friday. Friday, the day the HR meeting was. Scheduled the day they wanted me to sign the house paperwork.
I'll be yes.
Day the bank transfers lined up, everything converged on that date. Ethan walked into the kitchen. I heard him open the fridge, pour a drink, and say quietly, he won't see it coming. But he was wrong. Because that morning, for the first time, I saw everything clearly, every motive, every whisper, every step that had been taken without me. I stepped back into my office, closed the door gently, and allowed myself one slow, steady breath They had a plan for Friday. So did I. The next discovery wouldn't just shock MIT, would confirm who was truly standing with me in this house. I always thought my daughter was quiet because she was shy that morning. I realized she was quiet because she was carrying things. No child should ever carry alone. What device you're on right now? When Ethan disappeared into the kitchen, I stepped into the narrow hallway that led to the back porch. I needed to air something real, something that didn't feel manipulated or rehearsed. The morning breeze was cool, brushing gently against the side of the house. For a few seconds, it felt like the world outside still belonged to me. Then a soft sound broke the stillness. Footsteps. Hesitant and uneven Sophie, she came out through the sliding door. Her shoulders hunched the way they always were when she was trying not to cry. She didn't see me. I was standing behind the curtain near the window, blending into the shadowed part of the porch. She leaned against the wooden railing, clutching her phone so tightly her knuckles turned pale. Her eyes glistened, reflecting the early sunlight as she started scrolling anxiously, like she was searching for the right words to say to someone. Then I heard her whisper, "Please, please don't do this." Her voice cracked. Not like she was begging for herself. She was begging for me. She lifted the phone to her ear. Someone picked up. I could only hear her side of the call. But that was enough. "Just listen," she said softly. "He doesn't deserve this. He has no idea what you're planning." My breath caught. Sophie paused, shaking her head. "No, I'm not taking sides. I'm telling you what's right." Another pause. Longer this time, her eyes filled with tears. "You can't keep lying to him. He trusts you both. He believes everything you say." I knew exactly who she was talking to. Laura, maybe Ethan, maybe both. She wiped her eyes quickly, as if someone might see. "I already told you. I won't be part of it. I won't sign anything." The wind picked up, rustling the leaves, trying to soften the weight of her words. But nothing could soften that moment. My daughter had been pulled into something she didn't want to be a part of, something she had been resisting alone. She lowered her voice again. "If you go through with this, you're going to regret it." She ended the call abruptly, pressing her forehead against the railing, her shoulders trembling. I had never felt more proud of her or more ashamed of myself. I should have seen the signs. The distance, the tension, the way she looked at me sometimes like she wanted to say something, but stopped herself. She wasn't avoiding me. She was trying to protect me. I waited until she stepped inside before moving. When I followed her into the living room, I stayed invisible. Tucked behind the partial wall near the stairs, Ethan was waiting for her. He crossed his arms. "Did you seriously call Mom?" Sophie didn't even look at him. "Someone has to." "What is wrong with you?" he snapped. "Why are you always defending him?" She turned toward him slowly. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but stronger than I'd ever heard it. "Because he's my father. And because you're hurting him." Ethan rolled his eyes like she was being childish. "You're too emotional. This is business. It's practical." Sophie stepped closer, her voice trembling with anger. "It's betrayal," Ethan scoffed. "You don't even know what we're doing." "I know enough," she said. "And I know you're trying to take everything from him." The silence between them sharpened. Ethan finally spoke, dismissive as ever. "You're not involved. You don't get a vote." She laughed. One of those painful, humorless laughs that comes from exhaustion. "You really think I won't fight you?" Ethan's face darkened. "Don't make this harder." Sophie shook her head. "You're making it harder by pretending Dad doesn't matter." Laura entered the room at that moment, a folder in her hands. She froze when she saw Sophie's expression. "What happened now?" she asked, a tired lie. Sophie didn't hesitate. "I told him I'm not signing anything, and I won't help you hurt Dad." Laura sighed, not angry, just annoyed. "Sweetheart, you don't understand how life works yet." Sophie looked at her mother with something close to heartbreak. "I understand too well," and she walked away past the stairs, up to her room, door softly closing behind her. When the house fell silent again, I stayed where I was, letting everything sink through. Me like sand through fingers. Sophie wasn't just resisting them, she was standing between me and their plan alone, and she knew more than she had written. In that torn diary page, I exhaled slowly, steadying the truth inside me. If my daughter was willing to risk everything to warn me, then I owed her the strength to face whatever came next. Tomorrow, I would discover the missing piece. The part of the plan that explained why Friday mattered so much. I wasn't planning to meet anyone that morning, but sometimes the truth waits in places you'd never expect. Quiet offices, old cafes, people you haven't spoken to in months. What you're drinking right now, after hearing Sophie's warning. After realizing how long she'd been fighting battles I didn't even know existed, I felt a strange kind of resolve settle in me. Not anger. Not panic. Something quieter. The feeling a man gets when he decides to stop ignoring the signs. I slipped out of the house the way I'd entered, silent, unseen. The sky was a flat gray now, the kind that feels neither sad nor bright, just honest. I drove to the only person who would understand what to do with the kind of truth that fits inside documents, Daniel Cross. My lawyer for the past 12 years, calm, sharp. A man who read contracts the way surgeons read scans. We met at a tiny cafe near his office, a place with chipped ceramic mugs and the soft hum of old jazz music. When I walked in, he looked up from his phone and froze for half a second. Something in his expression told me he already knew part of the story. "You look like you didn't sleep," he said, standing up to shake my hand. "I didn't," replied. "Sit." We took a corner table. The waitress poured coffee without asking. She remembered us. Daniel waited until she walked away, then leaned forward. "Tell me everything." I didn't tell him everything. Not yet. I just repeated what was safe, what wouldn't give away that. I'd been listening behind walls. "There's something strange happening at home," I said carefully. "Paperwork. Conversations. Documents I haven't seen." Daniel didn't look surprised. That hurt more than anything. He exhaled long and slow. "Michael, I was going to call you. There's something you need to know." My stomach tightened. "About what?" He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder, thin but heavy with meaning. "Your wife contacted me last month." I felt the world tilt slightly. "She said she wanted to reorganize assets," he continued. "Property, accounts, long-term benefits. She requested drafts. Drafts, plural." He slid a document across the table. "This is one of them." The title hit me like cold water. Request for ownership transfer. Hart Residence, my residence, my home, my name was printed beneath the line labeled current holder. Under. Transferee. Ethan Hart. The lump in my throat was nearly impossible to swallow. "She said you'd sign," Daniel murmured. "Said you'd already discussed it." "You haven't," I said quietly. He nodded. I suspected that. He took another sip of coffee, then continued. "They also asked about your pension distribution. HR reached out to me last week about beneficiary updates. Someone requested the forms." My pulse ticked hard against my ribs. "Someone?" I asked. Daniel held my gaze. "Your son." A silence thick enough to drown and settled between us. The cafe around us kept moving, cups clinking, doors opening, conversations murmuring, but none of it reached me. I stared at the document again. The lines were too straight. To clean, to final. Daniel broke the silence first. "This isn't a misunderstanding, Michael. They're coordinating something, together." I rubbed my palms against my jeans. "I know." He raised an eyebrow. "How much do you know?" "Enough to say this isn't accidental." Daniel nodded, his expression shifting into something more professional, more protective. "Then you need to prepare." Quietly, I swallowed. "What do I do?" He opened the folder again and pulled out 3 more sheets. "Start with proof. Keep copies of everything. Any document you find, any call you overhear, any transfer you didn't authorize, save it." I almost smiled. "I already have," gave a short, approving nod. "Good, then you're ahead." He slid the main document back to me. "They wanted this filed next week," which lined up perfectly with Friday. I slipped the paper into my coat pocket, feeling the weight of it settle against my chest. Daniel leaned in. You need to stay calm. Let them think you're unaware. I can do that, Michael, he paused. Don't sign anything. Not even a delivery receipt. Not a single piece of paper. I won't. He relaxed slightly, like he'd been holding tension on my behalf. When I left the cafe, the sky had darkened, and the first hint of rain hung in the air. I stood beside my car for a moment, letting the cold breeze hit my face. The betrayal wasn't a guess. Anymore, it wasn't a fear. It was a file in my pocket. A file my wife and son never expected me to see. And as I started the car, one thought crystallized in my mind. They had a plan for me, but I had just found the person who would help me dismantle it. Tomorrow morning, their control would start slipping one document at a time. I wasn't looking for more proof, but sometimes proof walks right into your hands when you least expect it, whether it's morning or night where you are. When I returned home from meeting Daniel, the house felt unusually still, not quiet still. Like everything inside it was balancing on a thin line. Shoes were scattered near the door. A jacket hung off the back of the couch. Someone had brewed coffee recently. The bitter smell still lingered in the air. I paused near the staircase. Listening, no voices, no. Footsteps. Just the soft hum of the fridge and the ticking wall clock. Then, I noticed something that didn't belong where it was. Ethan's phone. Glowing faintly on the armrests of the living room sofa, unlocked, face dash up, notifications. Visible, my first instinct was to walk away. I had never touched my children's phones, not even when they were young. But after the last few days, after the documents, the calls, the second account, something inside me shifted. This wasn't snooping. This was self-defense. I stepped closer and glanced at the screen. A message preview glowed bright. Ethan, we push him this week. My breath caught. Another notification appeared instantly, as if the universe had timed it. He signs easiest when he's tired. My stomach tightened. My hands, surprisingly, didn't shake. They were steady to steady, the kind of steadiness that comes from a man who has reached the edge of his patience without raising his voice. I picked up the phone, expecting it to lock instantly. It didn't. Maybe he trusted the house too much. Maybe he never imagined I'd see anything. Maybe he thought I was too naive. I opened the message thread. The conversation was worse than anything I expected. He's mentally soft now. Just guide him, Mom says. Act sympathetic. Pretend it's for his benefit. Frame it as teamwork. They weren't just planning to get me to sign something, they had scripted how to manipulate me emotionally. Scrolled further. Voice message 017. Make him feel like he's slowing us down. Create pressure. He'll give in. I didn't play the voice note. I couldn't. The words on the screen were enough then. I saw something that made my chest ache in a completely different way. A message from Sophie. Sophie, please stop. Sophie, you're hurting him. He doesn't know what you're doing. Ethan's reply was ice cold. Stay out of this. You're ruining everything. Ruining everything. I stared at those words for a long moment. How easily he dismissed her. How casually he dismissed me. As if ruining me was the natural order of things. I kept scrolling. The next message made my heart thud hard against my ribs. Ethan, Mom agrees. We go through with the plan tomorrow. Weren't waiting for Friday. They had moved. The timeline up. I took a slow breath and quietly forwarded the entire thread to a private email I'd made years ago, the kind you only use for emergency documents. Then I placed the phone back exactly where I found it, angling it the same direction, making sure the screen looked untouched. The house remained still, the kind of stillness that holds secret just under the surface. As I stepped back, I heard a soft sound behind me. I turned. Sophie was standing near the hallway, half hidden behind the corner, watching me with wide eyes. She hadn't seen the phone in my hand, but she had seen the look on my face. Dad, she whispered. Are you okay? Her voice carried something fragile fear mixed with hope. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat. I'm all right. She stepped closer, searching my expression. I heard them talking again. They're getting worse. I nodded gently. I know. She looked startled. You know? For a second, she stopped breathing. Not because she was afraid of them anymore, but because she realized she wasn't alone. Her shoulders sagged with relief, and she whispered, I've been trying to warn you. Right. Placing a hand on her arm. You've done more than enough. She pressed her lips together, fighting back tears. Mom and Ethan. They said they'd finish everything tomorrow. I heard, I said softly. She let out a shaky breath and stepped back, glancing toward the kitchen as if someone might appear at any moment. What are you going to do? She asked. For the first time in days, I felt something powerful settle in my bones. Not fear, not confusion, not shock. Control, quiet, measured control. I met her eyes. I'm going to let them make their move. Her eyebrows knitted. Because the moment someone believes you're helpless, I said calmly, is the moment they reveal who they really are. She nodded slowly, absorbing it then, almost as if she knew the weight of what was coming. She whispered, I'll stand with you, whatever happens. I placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You already have. Behind us, Ethan's footsteps echoed from upstairs. I slipped into my office before he saw me, because now I knew exactly what tomorrow would bring. And I needed them to believe I was still blind. I heard footsteps behind me, soft ones, and for the first time in days, I didn't tense. Whether you're on your phone or laptop, the house had fallen into its usual afternoon rhythm. Cabinets opening, a faucet running, the faint shuffle of someone moving upstairs. Everything looked normal, but every sound felt different now that I knew what lived beneath the surface. I stayed in my office a little longer, letting the documents I'd seen, the messages I'd read, and the betrayal I'd felt settle into something steady. Not anger, something colder, something useful. Then I heard that soft footstep again, light, hesitant, like the person behind it wasn't sure they were welcome. Sophie, I said quietly, without turning. She froze in the doorway. I didn't have to look to know she was hugging her arms close to her body, like she always did when she felt unsafe in her own home. Dad, can we talk? I turned my chair slowly. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her, not out of secrecy, but out of fear someone else might overhear. Her eyes were red again, the way they were that morning, not from crying, but from knowing too much. She stood there, trying to find her words. I've been hearing things, she whispered. I know, I said softly. Her breath caught. You know. She looked at me as if the ground she'd been balancing on finally stopped shaking. She slowly came closer, sitting across from me, her hands clasped tightly. Her voice cracked. Dad, they're planning something. Something serious. I didn't want to scare you, but you weren't the one who scared me, I interrupted gently. They were. Lip trembled at that. I tried to stop them. I know you did. Those 4 words landed on her like relief. She took a slow breath, gathering courage. Then she reached into the pocket of her jeans and pulled out something smaller, folded sticky note, creased, worn at the edges like she'd carried it for days. She placed it gently on my desk. I wrote this down when I heard them talking on Monday, she whispered. I didn't know how to give it to you. I unfolded it. The handwriting was rushed, shaky. Consultant's name, V. Hale recommendation, full removal. A coldness slid down my spine. Full removal, not job adjustment, not restructuring, not advice. Removal. They weren't just planning to move me aside. They wanted me gone from my position. My financial independence. Dad, she whispered. I heard Ethan say. They want the company to see you as incapable. I looked up slowly. They said that. She nodded, tears gathering again. They think if the consultant marks you as declining, HR will push you out. And once that happens, you'll be too overwhelmed to fight the house transfer. The entire plan clicked together like a puzzle, piece sliding into place. Ethan wasn't just greedy. He was strategic. Laura wasn't just complicit. She was coordinated. And Sophie was the only one trying to stop a machine she never asked to be part of. I placed my hand over hers. You were never supposed to carry this. She shook her head. I couldn't stay quiet. You don't deserve this. Her voice cracked again, this time from anger, not fear. They're treating you like you're disposable. I kept my tone steady. Their mistakes don't define me. She wiped her eyes quickly. Dad, whatever they try tomorrow, promise me you won't sign anything. I gave her a small, calm nod. I won't. He exhaled deeply, shoulders loosening for the first time in days. Good, because I can't watch them take everything from you. I paused, studying her face, the worry, the strength, the quiet loyalty. You know, I murmured, when people reveal who they are, they also reveal who stands with you. She looked down, embarrassed. I didn't do much. You did what mattered. Outside the office, Ethan's voice drifted faintly from the hallway. He was on the phone, again, confident, careless. Yeah, tomorrow works. You won't suspect a thing. Sophie flinched at the sound of his voice. She looked toward the door, then back at me, whispering urgently, Dad, please be careful. They think you're blind. They think you'll just fold. I nodded calmly. Let them think that. She stared at me for a long moment, searching my expression for something: fear, anger, confusion. But all she found was control. Quiet, measured control. She whispered, You already know what you're going to do, don't you? I offered her a faint smile. I do. She stood slowly, still worried but steadier now. Before leaving the room, she said something so soft I almost missed it. I'm with you. No matter what happens tomorrow. And she meant it. After she left, I closed my office door fully for the first time in days. The room fell into complete silence. On my desk, the sticky note with full removal lay beside the printed HR. Emails and the bank statements. All the pieces were there. All the evidence lined up like a quiet confession. And tomorrow? Tomorrow. They would walk straight into their own plan, believing they were the ones in control. People think big decisions happen in loud rooms with shouting, slammed doors, raised voices, but the biggest decision of my life happened in silence. In a small office with the blinds half closed, what room you're sitting in right now. After Sophie left my office, the house settled into a strange rhythm, normal on the surface, broken underneath. Ethan's footsteps stomped across the upstairs hallway. Laura's voice drifted faintly from the bedroom, rehearsing another one of her calm explanations. Water boiled in the kettle. A cupboard closed. Life continued, pretending not to be unraveling. I sat at my desk, the light from my monitor reflecting off the printed pages. Spread in front of me. Bank statements, .HR, emails, performance reviews. My son's messages, Sophie's warning note, everything. I needed was already in my hands. The only thing missing was a plan. Not revenge, not confrontation. A plan. A quiet, controlled path forward, one that didn't rely on shouting or accusations or desperate pleas. That wasn't my way. That was never my way. I opened my employee portal and entered the administrative section. Not many people knew it existed. Fewer knew how to access it. It logged every evaluation, every metric, every report tied to my position. I began downloading everything. 10 years of performance, reviews, client testimonials, project statistics, company awards, documents that painted the real picture of who I was professionally, not the version my son had tried to create. Then something caught my eye. Last month's evaluation, edited, the timestamp glowed like a warning label. Edited by E. Heart. My hands went still on the mouse. My son hadn't just lied, he tampered with records. I clicked the version history tab. The original evaluation appeared. Consistent. Reliable, exceeds expectations, the edited version said. Inconsistent, declining, needs oversight. 2 sentences rewrote my professional identity. I printed both versions, placing them side by side. The contrast was almost absurd, like someone had tried to replace a man with a shadow of him. This was no longer a misunderstanding. This was fraud. I continued gathering documents, creating a folder on my desktop labeled Insurance Bench PRIP Bench Prep. A private joke I'd used for years, it meant. Prepare your case before you walk into the arena. By the time I finished, my folder was full like a quiet arsenal of truth. A knock sounded on the doorframe. Sophie peeked in again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you okay?" "You've been in here a while." She didn't enter. She just waited. She was giving me room, but offering herself if I needed it. "I'm fine," I said softly. She nodded. "If they talk to you tonight, just remember what we saw." We got the smallest word in the world, but that afternoon, it held the weight of loyalty I never expected. She left again, and the house returned to its pattern, none aware of the shift happening behind a closed office door. I continued to prepare next. I opened a blank document and began typing notes. Everything I remembered hearing. Everything I had seen, in precise, factual order. Not emotional, not exaggerated, just truth. Clean, sharp truth. Then I saved it as statement if needed, not because I'd planned to use it, but because preparing it gave me clarity. My plan wasn't to confront them. Not yet. Not emotionally. Not in anger. My plan was to let them walk into a room tomorrow believing they held all the power, while I held every piece of paper that could dismantle their plan. Outside the office, I heard Ethan say loudly, "Once we talk to Dad tonight, everything will fall into place." I closed the folder on my desk calmly and leaned back in my chair. You see, some people think silence means weakness, but silence is how careful men sharpen their understanding. Silence is how truth grows teeth. Silence is how a quiet man becomes dangerous. I opened one last document, my original employment offer letter, signed years ago, clear binding. It stated that termination required board review and documented cause. Not manipulated reports, not whispered suggestions, not secondhand claims. I printed it, too. As the page slid from the printer, warm and crisp, I realized something. They had built their plan on assumptions. Assumption. I wouldn't check my email. Assumption I wouldn't see the transfers. Assumption I wouldn't question a signature request. Assumption I wasn't paying attention, but they forgot one thing. The moment you underestimate a quiet man, it's the moment he becomes unforgettable. I placed all the papers into a black folder, closed it gently. Tomorrow they would try to corner me. What they didn't know was that tomorrow, I would be ready to let the truth speak louder than any of their plans. People think confrontations feel like explosions, but in real life, they feel like slow-burning matches, quiet, steady, and impossible to put out once lit. What you're holding in your hand right now? Friday arrived with the kind of stillness that makes the air feel heavier. I woke up earlier than usual, quietly letting the morning light seep into the room in pale bands. I didn't wake anyone. I didn't move fast, simply sat at the edge of the bed, letting my thoughts arrange themselves in neat, unemotional lines, just like the documents waiting in my office drawer. Down the hallway, I heard Laura moving first. Her voice was low, calm, rehearsed. Ethan followed soon after, his footsteps heavier, brisk, too confident. They didn't come to check on me. They went straight to the kitchen, their command center. I stayed in my office, listening. "It has to be today," Ethan whispered. "HR said the meeting's locked in," Laura replied. "Just stay composed. Don't rush him. If we overwhelm him, he'll hesitate." Overwhelm, hesitate, pressure. They had outlined emotional tactics as clearly as if they were discussing sales strategies. I opened the black folder on my desk. Inside it were 2 weeks of betrayal. Both versions of my edited performance review, bank statements showing transfers to the second account, HR emails about early separation, the transition notes, screenshots of Ethan's messages, Sophie's sticky note. The updated consultant recommendation, each sheet was cool to the touch. Clinical. Undeniable. I didn't gather them to confront. I gathered them to stay grounded. To remind myself I wasn't imagining any of it. Around 8 a.m., Laura knocked gently on the office door. "Michael, we need to head in early today. HR is requesting presence for some procedural updates." Procedural updates. If she noticed the slight smile that touched my lips, she didn't comment. I grabbed my coat slowly, deliberately, of course. When I stepped into the hallway, Sophie was standing near the stairs. Her eyes found mine, instantly worried, tight, knowing. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her look said, I'm here. Whatever happens, I'm here. The three of us, Laura, Ethan, and I, left the house together. But only one of us walked with purpose. At the office, HR was already waiting. A glass room, a long table, 2 chairs set aside for family support. Support? The irony was almost laughable. We sat down. Ruth, the HR representative, offered me a polite, thin smile the kind people use when they're about to say something uncomfortable. Michael, she began, we're here today to discuss some observations regarding performance and long-term alignment. Ethan leaned forward slightly, hands folded, playing the part of the concerned son. Laura placed her hand on my arm, as if she were preparing me for a difficult conversation. The performance file slid across the table. We've received reports, Ruth continued, that your recent output has been inconsistent. I opened the file. The edited review stared back at me, declining, disengaged, unreliable. I let the lie linger for a moment, let Ethan feel comfortable in the illusion that everything was going according to his rehearsed script. Then I reached into my folder and pulled out the original review, the one I had printed. Is this the version you meant? I asked calmly. Ruth blinked. This isn't the file we received. I placed the 2 versions side by side. One said exceeds expectations. The other said needs oversight. The date stamps were identical. The signatures matched, only the content had changed. Ethan stiffened, color draining from his face. Laura shot him a warning glance he couldn't hide from fast enough. Ruth leaned forward, frowning. Where did you get this, Michael? From the system, I said softly, before it was altered. Altered, the word dropped into the room like a heavy object. Ruth turned to Ethan. Your login is attached to the edited file. Can you explain? That Ethan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out with confidence. It was a mistake, he stammered. No, I said gently. It wasn't. For a moment, the room felt suspended in air, no sound, no movement, just 3 people caught between truth and consequence. Laura tried to interject. We were just trying to what? Help me. The question was quiet, but it cut deeper than shouting ever could. Ruth straightened, her professional mask tightening. We will need to investigate this. Of course they would. Tampering with corporate evaluations wasn't a misunderstanding. It was fraud. Ethan's confidence crumbled. Dad, please. Let's talk about this privately, but it was too late. Truth, once exposed, doesn't go back into the dark. I closed my folder slowly and stood. Thank you for your time. Think I understand everything now. Ruth nodded, still processing. Laura reached out as if to stop me, but I stepped past her gently. The meeting wasn't explosive. It wasn't chaotic. It was quiet, painfully quiet. The same kind of quiet that visits right before a storm changes direction. As we left the building, Ethan muttered, "This isn't over." It was right. It wasn't. Because today was the day they realized the quiet man they thought they could control was finally listening. Most people believe families break apart with shouting and slammed doors. But mine broke in a quiet conference room under soft fluorescent lights, with everyone pretending they weren't the ones responsible, what you're eating or drinking right now, after the HR meeting. The 4 of us walked down the corridor like strangers forced into the same frame. No one spoke. No one breathed too loudly. The silence was thick enough to touch. Ethan walked slightly ahead, shoulders tense. Laura followed closely behind him, her hand gripping her purse so tightly the leather creaked. Sophie waited for us in the lobby. The moment she saw my face, her own softened with something like relief and fear. "Dad," she whispered. I nodded once, subtle. She understood. She always did. Laura forced a smile for the receptionist while her eyes darted anxiously at Ethan. They exchanged a quick look, blame wrapped inside panic. I kept walking. We reached the car in silence. But Ethan finally broke. "You didn't have to humiliate me in there," he muttered. I opened the passenger door slowly. "I didn't humiliate you. The truth just came out." He scoffed, bitter. "You're acting like you're innocent." Sophie stepped forward before I could speak. "Innocent of what, Ethan? Being your father?" He rolled his eyes. You don't get it. This was supposed to be simple. Simple? Sophie shot back. You lied about his performance. You changed documents. That's not lying, Ethan snapped. It's strategy. Laura grabbed his arm. Ethan, not here. But the damage was done. The word strategy floated in the air, sharp and ugly. I closed the car door and leaned against the roof, the cold metal grounding me. My voice stayed even when I finally spoke. What exactly was the strategy? Silence. Ethan's jaw twitched. Laura looked away. Sophie was the only one who didn't break eye contact. She said softly, "Tell him the truth." For once, Laura's voice cracked first. "Michael, we just wanted stability." "We thought stability for who?" I asked. She swallowed hard. "For the family." Sophie whispered, "No, for you and Ethan." Ethan exploded then, not loudly, but with frustration boiling under the surface. "Why is everything my fault? I did what needed to be done." "You're slowing down, Dad. You don't keep up. You don't even check the things you sign." There it was. The belief he'd built everything on. The belief that made betrayal easy. "You think I'm weak?" I said quietly. He didn't deny it. Laura placed a hand on his back, trying to calm him. "Michael, please don't take this personally." "How else should I take it?" I asked softly. "You tampered with my work records." Rage flickered in Ethan's eyes. Rage not at guilt, but at being caught. "They were just small edits," he muttered. "We needed HR to understand the situation." "And what situation is that?" Sophie demanded. Ethan looked away. I stepped forward. Not aggressive, just present. "You tried to position me as incapable at work, at home. On paper, Laura stepped between us. We were doing what's best for the future." "Whose future?" I asked again, calm but unshakable. She didn't answer. In that silence, something shifted. A line was drawn, not loud or dramatic, but permanent. Sophie stood on my side of it, Ethan stood on the other. Laura hovered in the middle, unable to hide which direction she was leaning. Sophie's voice broke as she said, "I told you this would happen. I told you Dad would find out." Ethan snapped, "You ruined everything." "No," she whispered. "You ruined everything." A security guard walked past us, glancing over, sensing tension. We quieted instantly. Families often mask chaos behind practiced smiles, and we were no exception. Laura finally spoke again, voice trembling. "Michael, can we talk about this at home?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, but not the way you're expecting." We walked to the car. This time I took the back seat with Sophie. Ethan drove. Laura sat in silence beside him. The ride home felt like an echo chamber, everyone trapped with their own guilt and fear. When we pulled into the driveway, Ethan turned off the engine but didn't move. He stared straight ahead and whispered, "Dad, please don't ruin our lives over this." His words weren't an apology. They weren't remorse. They were a plea for me to stay blind a little longer for their benefit, not mine. I opened the door slowly and stepped out. Before closing it, I said softly, "I'm not ruining anything, Ethan. I'm just finally looking." His face crumpled. Not from regret, from losing control. Sophie walked beside me toward the house, her presence steady, grounding inside. Air felt heavy again, but different now, like every wall knew what had just taken place and was waiting for what came next. Because today wasn't the ending of their plan. Today was the moment the cracks in their unity finally showed. And tomorrow. Those cracks would become the truth neither of them could escape. Most people imagine confrontations as storms, loud voices, angry gestures, broken plates. But the worst confrontations happen in quiet rooms. With the curtains half open and the truth sitting uninvited between everyone. Whether you're sitting or lying down right now, when we stepped into the house, no one moved for a moment. It was as if the front door had sealed us inside a different version of our home. One where the air was heavier and the silence had teeth. Laura placed her purse on the table, smoothing her blouse with trembling hands. Ethan paced near the living room like he wanted to argue, to justify something, but didn't know where to start. Sophie stayed close to me, her shoulder almost brushing me in a small, quiet show of allegiance. I took a seat at the dining table. "Sit," said softly. My voice wasn't commanding. It didn't need to be. The weight of everything that happened at the office still hung over them. Laura sat across from me. Ethan remained standing until Laura tugged at his sleeve. Reluctantly, he lowered himself into the chair beside her. The house settled. I folded my hands on the table. We're going to talk now. All of us. No one answered. The clock on the wall ticked once, twice. Then I continued, I want you to tell me why you were trying to force me out of my job. Ethan looked at the floor. Laura inhaled sharply. Sophie watched them both, waiting. Laura spoke first. Michael, you're tired. You work too much. You don't take care of yourself. We thought stepping back would be good for you. Soft, polite lie. I met her gaze. Then why did Ethan edit my performance files? She flinched, tiny, but real. Ethan's jaw tightened. I didn't raise my voice. Why did HR receive a fabricated report from you, Ethan? He leaned back, trying to look unaffected. Dad, you don't understand the pressure. The company is changing. You're old school. You're slow with tech. They needed to see that. I repeated calmly. Or you. He swallowed hard. Silence again. And what about the house? I asked, why the rush to transfer it? Laura looked everywhere except at me. We thought it made sense. To simplify responsibilities. To simplify the process of removing me. I asked quietly, her shoulders slumped. A small piece of truth slipped out in her tone before her words followed. You were holding us back, she whispered. That was the moment something inside me cooled completely, not shattered. Not cracked, cooled. Turning steady, sharp, controlled, Sophie finally spoke, voice trembling. He wasn't holding anyone back. You were just impatient. Stay out of this, Ethan snapped, turning toward her. But Sophie didn't shrink this time. She straightened. No, I won't. Because you two forgot something. Dad is still here. He's still the one who built this house, paid these bills, held us together. Her voice cracked. And you've both been treating him like a signature waiting to happen. Laura's eyes filled with a mix of guilt and frustration. We didn't mean to hurt him. You did, Sophie said. Every single day you whispered behind his back, you did. I reached for the envelope I'd prepared and placed it gently on the table. The soft sound of paper meeting would made both Laura and Ethan flinch. Inside were the printed bank statements, tampered performance reviews, the HR emails. Michael. Laura breathed, dread creeping into her expression. What is that? Everything you expected me not to find, I replied quietly. Ethan stood. Dad, you're overreacting. Sit down, Ethan. Hesitated. Then sad because there was something in my tone he hadn't heard before. A firmness that didn't need volume. I continued, You didn't just betray my trust. You documented it. Ethan's mouth opened, but no words came out. Laura clasped her hands together like she was trying to keep them from shaking. We were scared, she whispered. We thought, if we controlled things early, we could avoid bigger problems later. I nodded slowly. You controlled everything but the truth. Sophie turned toward me, eyes wet but proud. I rested a hand lightly on her shoulder. Thank you, I murmured. Her voice wavered. Dad, I tried. I know, I said. And that matters more than you realize. Ethan exhaled sharply. So what now? You're going to punish us? Throw us out? Take everything. Punish, as if justice were cruelty. I stood up slowly, letting the chair legs scrape softly against the floor. I'm not here to punish anyone, I said. I'm here to take my life back. Laura's breath caught. Ethan's jaw clenched, and Sophie sweet. Loyal Sophie felt like she could finally breathe. I picked up the folder, tapping it lightly against my palm. Starting tomorrow, things will change. For all of us, Laura whispered. Michael, what does that mean? I looked at them evenly. It means, I said, that the truth has finally entered this house. And when truth enters a home built on secrets, someone's foundation always cracks. I always thought wills were about death, but that morning, sitting across from my lawyer, I realized they're actually about truth, about who stood with you and who stood against you when it mattered, what the temperature is where you are. I drove to Daniel's office early, before the city fully woke up. The sky was gray again, stretching low and heavy, matching the weight sitting in my chest. As I parked, I looked at the building, the same one I'd walked into for more than a decade. Always for paperwork, never for protection. Today, it was different. Today it felt like a safe place in a world that had shifted under my feet. Daniel greeted me at the door. He looked at me with an expression halfway between concern and controlled readiness. "Come in," he said. "Let's get started." He sat in his office quiet room, soft lighting, dark wooden desk. A place where words felt more solid than the ones exchanged at home. Daniel folded his hands. "You've been through enough. We should finalize what you mentioned last time." I nodded. He opened a manila folder and pulled out a stack of papers, neat, organized. "Intentional. This is the updated will," he said. "It reflects the changes you requested." The word update felt heavier than the documents in front of me. Daniel continued. "Your estate will now be divided with Sophie as the primary beneficiary. She receives the house, the savings accounts, and ownership rights to your investments." I breathed out slowly. Sophie, the only one who had stood beside me, the only one who had warned me, the only one who had fought for me. "And what about Laura?" I asked quietly. Daniel flipped a page. "She retains a symbolic percentage, nothing controlling, more a gesture than a share." I nodded again. "Fair? And Ethan?" he asked gently. My voice stayed calm. "Remove him entirely." He didn't question it. He didn't need to. He simply marked the change. The pen glided across the page. With a soft scratch, one line. One name removed, one future rewritten. Silence settled in the room. Deeper than before, Daniel closed the folder. "I also included a clause you requested that any attempt at coercion, manipulation, or undue pressure invalidates the inheritance for that party." A faint, humorless smile touched my lips. Good, because coercion was exactly what they'd planned, and they never expected me. To protect myself legally, he handed me the final page. Signature line at the bottom. Paper crisp, untouched. "Take your time," Daniel said. But I didn't need time. I picked up the pen, held it, stared at the ink tip for a moment. Then I signed my name steady. Measured without a single tremor. The most important signature of my life. Daniel nodded. "It's done." Done. A simple word for something that changed everything. He slid the documents into a sealed envelope. "This goes into the vault today. A copy will be emailed to you, securely encrypted. Another is printed for your records." I took the printed copy and set it gently on my lap. Sophie would have a future, a home, security, stability. Not because she demanded it, not because she expected it, but because she earned it with her loyalty. Quiet, unwavering, selfless loyalty. Daniel leaned back. "How do you feel?" I looked out the window at the gray sky, exhaling slowly. "I feel clear," he nodded once, satisfied. "Good. Clarity is what people forget to fight for." Before leaving, I asked him one more question. "Daniel, did you ever think I'd need something like this?" He shook his head gently. "Not from you. But sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who surprise us the hardest." I stood, taking the sealed envelope with me as I stepped out of his office. The cold air brushed my face sharp, refreshing, real. I walked to my car feeling something I hadn't felt since this began. Control. Not power, not revenge. Control. The kind that comes from knowing the truth. Preparing quietly and letting every choice be intentional. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same, but I wasn't. The same man who had left that morning, Sophie emerged from the front door the moment she heard the car. Her eyes searched mine, anxious. "What happened?" she asked. I handed her the copy of the envelope. She hesitated, then opened it carefully. Her breath caught. "Dad, this is everything." "You didn't have to." "I did," I said quietly. "Because you were the one who stood beside me when everyone else stood against me." Tears formed in her eyes. "I don't want anything from you. I just want you to be okay." I smiled softly. "I know. And that's exactly why you deserve everything." She hugged me tightly. I held her, feeling the weight of weeks lift just slightly. Behind the curtains inside, I sensed movement, Laura watching, Ethan pacing, both unaware of what had just been legally sealed. As Sophie pulled back, I looked at the house not with fear or bitterness or sadness, but with calm certainty. They thought they had secured their future, but today, I secured my daughters, and tomorrow. They would realize the balance of power had quietly shifted. I didn't rewrite my will to reward loyalty. I rewrote it because loyalty is the only thing that still felt real in a house full of rehearsed lies. Whether you're at home or outside right now, when I stepped into the living room, Sophie followed behind me, clutching the envelope to her chest like she wasn't sure she was allowed to hold it. She looked down at the papers, again his wide breath uneven, disbelief mixing with sadness. "Dad, this is too much," she whispered. "It's not enough," I said calmly. She sank onto the couch, the envelope resting on her lap. Her fingers traced the seal as if she were afraid it might disappear if she blinked. You changed everything," she murmured. "The house? The accounts? All of it?" "Yes. But why me? Why not them?" "The question wasn't naive. It was painful because you were the only one protecting me," I said gently. "You were the only one who saw what was happening and tried to stop it." Her throat tightened. "I didn't do enough." "You did more than anyone else," I said. "You saw the cracks before I did." She looked away, trying to hide the tears forming. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think Mom and Ethan could do something like this. "You weren't supposed to handle it," I said. "Not alone." Sophie nodded, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. "I kept trying to warn you. I just didn't know how without making things worse." I sat beside her. "You didn't make anything worse. You saved me." Her breath hitched, and she covered her mouth with her hand like the relief was overwhelming. "Dad." "What happens now?" she whispered. "We move forward," I said. "Carefully, quietly, on our terms." She exhaled shakily, then looked at the envelope again. "I don't want to take anything from you." "You're not taking," I said softly. "You're receiving what you've earned." She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering herself. "Ethan and Mom, they'll hate me for this." "No," I said. "They'll hate me, not you." But Sophie shook her head. "They'll blame me. They always do when something doesn't go their way." A familiar ache settled in my chest. I had spent years believing Ethan was the one who needed guidance. But all along, Sophie needed protection in ways I never noticed. I spoke gently. "You don't stand alone anymore." She nodded, but the worry stayed in her eyes. For a moment, the house felt peaceful. The quiet between us wasn't heavy. It was warm, grounding. The kind of quiet I used to imagine filled our family before I realized how much of it had been broken beneath the surface. Then something shifted in her expression. Something more serious. "There's something else you should know," she said carefully. I turned fully toward her. "What is it?" She swallowed hard. "Mom and Ethan? They're not just planning for you to sign the house transfer. They've been talking about money, a lot of it." "I know about the second account," I said. She nodded. "But there's more. Ethan found a way to move funds through your company reimbursement system. Small amounts spread out. He said it's easier to hide that way." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "And Mom?" I asked. She helped him. "She said you'd never check your statements anyway." I leaned back slowly, feeling the truth sink in deeper. Sophie continued, "Dad, they want everything. Not just the house, not just your job, everything." I nodded once. "And that is exactly why you deserve what I left you." She shook her head lightly, overwhelmed again. "But I don't want to be the reason the family falls apart." "You're not," I said firmly. You're the reason it won't fall on top of me. A tear slipped down her cheek. She brushed it away quickly, embarrassed. Come here, I said softly. She hesitated, then leaned into me. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, steady, gentle. Her body trembled once before she let herself relax fully, head resting against my chest. She hadn't leaned on me like that in years. You didn't deserve any of this, she whispered. Neither did you, I replied. We stayed like that for a while, father and daughter. The only two people in the house who weren't pretending to be something they weren't. Then she lifted her head, breathing slowly. Mom and Ethan are going to ask you again tonight. They're going to push. I know, what will you say? I looked at her, the corners of my mouth lifting slightly. The truth. She nodded, understanding more from my tone than my words. Outside, the faint sound of a car door signaled their return. The calm was ending. The next storm was stepping onto the porch. I stood, helping her up gently. Stay close to me tonight. Just listen. I will, she whispered. I placed a hand on her shoulder. And remember, you're not the reason things are changing. A quiet strength entered her voice. Then who is? I looked toward the front door as keys jingled. The truth, I said quietly. Truth always does the changing, and tonight, truth would finally be spoken in the same house where so many lies were whispered. You can always tell when people are about to ask for something they shouldn't. Their smiles get softer, their voices get sweeter, their footsteps get quieter, like guilt has weight. What city you're in right now? The front door opened. Laura stepped inside first, keys still in her hand, eyes scanning the living room with a strange mix of caution and determination. Ethan followed right behind her, pacing like someone rehearsing lines in his head. The air shifted, instantly charged, humid, heavy. Sophie stood near me. She didn't hide how tense she was. She didn't pretend. She was bracing herself. Michael, Laura said softly. Can we talk? There it was, the beginning of the end of their plan. I nodded once. Yes. Let's sit. We gathered in the living room. Afternoon light poured through the curtains in thin stripes, like the room was divided into shadows and truth before a single word was spoken. Laura sat across from me. Ethan sat at an angle, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. Sophie stood near the doorway, watching everything with wide but steady eyes. Laura took a small breath and started the speech she had clearly practiced. Honey, you know we care about you. We want what's best for the family. I didn't interrupt. I wanted to hear the script. Ethan leaned forward, voice low and concerned. Dad, things are changing. The company is changing. We need to think about the future. I tilted my head slightly. Whose future? He swallowed. All of ours. Laura placed a hand on her lap. We know you've been under stress lately. We know work has taken a toll. So you fabricated a performance review, asked calmly. Her words died instantly. Ethan's jaw tightened. It wasn't fabrication. It was strategic? I offered. He froze. I continued, still steady. And the bank transfers? Were those strategic too? Laura blinked rapidly, her breath catching. Ethan straightened abruptly, panic flashing across his face before he buried it. Dad, he tried again? You're not understanding? I understand perfectly, I said softly. I understand more than you think. The room went still, the kind of stillness before a storm decides who it will hit. Laura placed a hand over her chest. Michael, please, this isn't the time to be dramatic. I almost laughed out of humor, but out of disbelief. Sophie stepped forward. Tell him the truth. Stop pretending you were helping him, Sophie, Laura warned. Stay out of. No, she said, voice trembling but strong. Not this time. The house fell into silence again, but this time, the silence wasn't protecting them. It was exposing them. Ethan finally exhaled, like he couldn't hold it in anymore. Fine. We needed to adjust things. You're slowing down, Dad. We were trying to prepare for when I what? I asked. When I finally became inconvenient? Ethan's face crumpled in frustration. You don't see what I see? You don't move as fast anymore? You don't understand the new systems. You don't get to rewrite my worth because it makes your plan easier, said quietly. Those words hit him harder than shouting ever could. Laura's voice softened into a whisper. Right. We thought if you stepped back, things would be smoother. Simpler for who? I asked again, but she had no answer. Instead, she reached for a folder on the coffee table. The one she'd been hiding. It's the one she thought I'd sign without looking. Michael, we need you to sign this, she said carefully. It's for the house. Sophie froze. Ethan watched me too closely. Laura smiled the faintest. Rehearsed smile. I opened the folder. The document stared back at me, clean lines. Legal phrasing, numbers printed in bold, transfer of ownership, Hart residence. My home, my memories, my life, being handed to my son. I nodded slowly, letting them believe I was considering it. Letting the silence stretch. Laura leaned in. If you sign, everything stabilizes. Everything gets easier, Ethan added quietly. We'll take care of everything. You won't have to worry. And that was the moment I realized they weren't just asking for a signature. They were asking for a surrender. I closed the folder gently. No, said the word wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Laura went pale. Michael, no, I repeated, calm as a winter morning. I'm not signing anything. Ethan shot up from the couch. You're making a mistake. No, I said again. I'm correcting one. His face reddened. You don't understand what this means. But I did. I understood perfectly. I saw the messages, I said softly. Your strategy, your timeline, your Friday plan. Ethan's breath caught in his throat, and I met with Daniel, I added. I updated my will. Laura's face cracked. The color drained completely. Sophie closed her eyes for one brief moment of relief. I stood slowly. The room felt different, now lighter, clearer, honest. You wanted everything in your hands, I said quietly. But everything has already been moved, Laura whispered, voice breaking. What did you do? I protected the person who protected me, I replied. Ethan looked at Sophie with shock, then betrayal, then something darker. You, he whispered at her. But she didn't look away. She didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. I placed a hand on Sophie's shoulder. For months. I said softly, you planned to remove me. I stepped toward the door. But today, I removed your power. And as the silence collapsed around them, they finally understood the one truth they never planned for. The quiet man wasn't weak. He was watching. Some nights arrive quietly and still change the rest of your life. What time it is where you are right now? After I told them I updated my will. The house fell into the kind of silence that doesn't belong to families, it belongs. Two strangers sitting too close together, holding secrets too heavy to speak aloud. Laura sank slowly onto the couch, her hands trembling in her lap. Ethan stood frozen, like someone had unplugged the confidence he carried all week. Sophie stayed next to me, not touching, not speaking, just there. Steady. No one dared move. The clock on the wall ticked twice before anyone breathed again. Laura finally whispered, Michael, what did you do? I protected myself, I said gently. The same way you've been protecting your plans. She flinched. Ethan took a step forward, anger bubbling up, but I raised my hand calmly. He stopped, because the tone I used wasn't one he recognized. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't intimidated. It was final. We're done discussing documents tonight, I said softly. But we will talk about what happens next. Laura swallowed hard. Michael, you're not thinking clearly. I've never been clearer. Ethan paced back and forth, running a hand through his hair. You can't just change everything overnight. Funny, I said quietly. That's exactly what you planned to do to me. Sophie turned her head, hiding a small, pained wince. She had heard enough of their planning to know it was true. Ethan stopped pacing. So that's it? You're just going to punish us? I looked at him for a long moment. No. Punishment comes from anger. I'm acting from clarity. He blinked hard, caught off guard. Laura leaned forward, desperate. Michael, honey. We were just trying to protect the family. We were struggling. Don't rewrite this, I said gently. You weren't protecting the family. You were securing it for yourselves. Laura looked away, shame flickering, but not enough to overpower her fear. Sophie stepped in then, voice soft but firm. Mom, Dad's been carrying this family for decades. How did you forget that? Laura closed her eyes as if the truth stung more than betrayal. The room felt heavier, tighter. Ethan broke the silence again.
Ow.
You should have talked to us before making changes. Should have warned us. Almost smiled sadly, not spitefully. That's exactly what I thought when I discovered what you were doing. His face tightened, the realization hitting him harder than my words. I turned toward the hallway. I'm going upstairs for a while. I need space. Laura stood quickly. Mikkel, please, don't leave this unresolved. I paused at the bottom of the stairs, looking back at all three of them, the betrayers. The loyal one, the cracks forming in what used to be our home. It's already resolved, I said softly. You just don't like the outcome. I walked upstairs, but I didn't close my bedroom door fully. Something in me knew the night wasn't finished. For a long time, sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the house breathe shallow, uneven, the way a body breathes after a blow to the chest. Muffled voices drifted up from downstairs. Sophie was quiet. Laura was crying softly. Ethan was whisper yelling, panicked, frustrated, cornered. I let their words blend into noise. Then I heard footsteps climbing the stairs slow. Careful, a gentle knock. Dad, Sophie's voice. Come in. She slipped inside and closed the door halfway. They're scared, she whispered. I know. They're saying it's your fault, but it's not. I know, I repeated. She hesitated, then sat beside me. Are you okay? Her question wasn't small. It wasn't polite. It carried the weight of everything she'd witnessed. Every plan, every lie. I inhaled slowly, exhaled just as slowly. I'm steady, she nodded, accepting that answer, even if it worried her. After a moment, she said, Dad, you need to know something. Her voice trembled. Ethan is talking about going to HR tomorrow again. Thinks he can reverse what happened today. He said he'll tell them you're unstable. I turned toward her carefully. Sophie swallowed. I don't want to scare you, but he's getting desperate. Desperate people made reckless choices. Thank you for telling me, I said. She reached for my hand tentatively, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed, and I took it gently. Dad, she whispered, I'm with you, even if things get ugly. I squeezed her hand. They won't get ugly. They'll get honest. Downstairs, a door slammed. Laura's voice rose, frantic. Ethan's voice rose louder. Sophie flinched, her fingers tightening around mine. The house was reaching a breaking point. A final one. I released her hand gently. Go to your room. Let them burn out their panic. Will you be okay? She asked. Yes. She stood slowly, pausing at the doorway. Tomorrow, whatever happens, I'll be standing with you. Her voice didn't shake this time. I know. I whispered. She closed the door behind her. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, letting the truth settle over me tonight. The house cracked. Tomorrow it collapses, and only the people who are honest will remain standing. People think endings are loud, but the truth is, real endings arrive like cold mornings, slow, clear, and impossible to ignore. How you found this video? The next morning the house felt different. Not calmer, not louder, just honest. No more pretending. No more whispering behind doors. Everyone's intentions had surfaced like ink rising through wet paper. I went downstairs early. The sun hadn't fully risen, and the kitchen was dim, holding the last seconds of yesterday's tension. I poured myself a glass of water and waited. Footsteps approached slow, hesitant. Laura entered first. She looked like she hadn't slept, her hair unbrushed, her face pale, her posture small. For the first time in years, she looked unsure of herself. Michael, she whispered, we need to talk. I know. She folded her arms, then unfolded them, trying to find stability in a body that no longer knew how to hide. Last night wasn't what I expected. I didn't think you'd react that way. You didn't think I'd react at all, I said softly. Her eyes dropped. A moment later, Ethan stepped inside too. His face was red not from anger, but from the bruised ego of a man who finally lost control of the story he was writing. He didn't look at me. We didn't look at Sophie, who hovered near the doorway. He stared at the floor like it was the only thing still on his side. Laura spoke again. Michael, We made mistakes. We were scared. Thought we were doing what was best for the family. You were doing what was best for yourselves, I said calmly. There's a difference. She winced, because lies sound different when they're echoed back to you. Ethan stepped forward, voice tight. Dad, can we fix this? Which part? I asked. The fraud? The manipulation? The attempt to take everything I built? Swallowed, throat bobbing. Sophie watched every detail, every blink, every breath, memorizing the truth she'd always known but had never heard spoken aloud. Laura tried again. We can fix this together. No, I said quietly. There's no together if trust is the price. A long silence followed, the kind of silence that happens when people finally see the consequences of what they've done. He blinked rapidly, anger rising through panic. You're choosing her over us. No, I said softly. You made that choice when you chose to betray me. He stepped back, like the words had hit him. Laura covered her mouth, tears welling. Michael, can't we undo this? Trust doesn't get undone, I said gently. It gets rebuilt. The people involved want to rebuild it. Ethan turned away, jaw clenched. Laura wiped her eyes. I continued calm and steady. You will not lose everything. You will not be thrown out. You will not be cut off from the life you've built with me. But you will not take what you tried to steal. Laura nodded slowly, accepting piece by piece what she had created. Ethan didn't speak. Instead, Sophie finally stepped forward, voice trembling. Dad, thank you. I placed a hand on her back, a small gesture, but one that meant everything. You stood by me. I'm just standing by you. As she closed her eyes, exhaling deeply. Laura whispered, Michael. I'm sorry, I know. Ethan whispered, Dad. I didn't think you'd ever fight back. I didn't fight, I said quietly. I just stopped looking away. The house fell silent, truly silent for the first time in weeks. No lies, no strategies, just truth. I picked up my coat and headed toward the door. Sophie walked with me. She didn't ask where I was going. She didn't need to. When I stepped outside, the cold air hit my face, fresh, honest, cleansing. Sophie whispered, What happens now? I looked toward the brightening sky. Now I said softly,
Now we begin again.
You and me, with truth, with quiet, the chance to build something new. She nodded, tears glistening, because in the end I continued. Quiet man leaves behind only one thing that matters. Sophie waited. The truth of who stood with him when the house fell. And with that, our new life finally started.